8 minutes and 34 seconds of UFC conspiracy theories. Let's check it out.
McGregor assassination attempt. UFC 229. McGregor versus
Whoa,
Khabib.
whoa! Assassination? Hold on.
Conor McGregor lost that fight. Khabib dominated him for 4 rounds before securing a 4th round submission. But according to whispers from inside the UFC, McGregor might have been lucky to make it to the cage at all. Hours before the biggest fight of his life, something happened backstage. Something serious enough.
What? Hold on. I watch way too much UFC to have never have heard this. They tried to assassinate him? The Russians? Yes, brother. Yes, brother. We get this guy, brother. They tried to get him, actually?
That UFC commentator John Anik referenced rumblings on his podcast days later. Something that made co-host Kenny Florian admit that he would have changed his bet against McGregor if he'd known about it beforehand. They never said what it was. They couldn't or wouldn't. But other details started emerging. Islam Makhachev, Khabib's teammate, was alleged.
Islam tried to kill Conor McGregor. Get him!
Allegedly seen making finger gun gestures at
No, finger gun. Islam Makhachev's in the hallway. Yes, brother. Look at this gun, brother. Conor, brother. I'll come for you, brother. Yes, brother. 2-3 years Dagestan. He's what? What?
McGregor in the hours leading up to the fight. Not playful, not joking.
Here's the thing. These Russian guys are actually crazy. They just jumped Dylan Dennis at the last UFC event. I forget what one it was. John Pork jumped Dylan Dennis. These guys are not normal human beings.
Threatening. Then came the bombshell. An unidentified individual was reportedly arrested inside the T-Mobile Arena for having a firearm. Not in the crowd.
Oh my! They arrested somebody for this? I don't know how I've never heard of this.
Inside the restricted backstage area, the arena where fighters, coaches, and cornermen prepared, the area where Conor McGregor was getting ready for the biggest fight of his career. The incident was allegedly so serious that UFC officials considered canceling the entire event. UFC 229, the most anticipated fight in company history, nearly canceled due to safety concerns. Think about what that means. The UFC doesn't cancel events. They've run shows during pandemics in empty arenas across the globe under impossible circumstances. For them to even consider pulling the plug on their biggest pay-per-view of all time, something catastrophic.
How have I never heard this story before? They tried to assassinate Conor? Is there something I'm missing here?
Must have been unfolding behind those doors. Joe Rogan addressed it on his podcast shortly after. During an episode with Justin Wren, he brought up an article about a gunman trying to get into the back of the arena. Then he moved on, quickly, almost too quickly, like someone who knew more than he was allowed to say. When Islam Makhachev allegedly made those finger gun gestures at McGregor, was he joking around, or was he sending a message? You can take steroids if you snitch. USADA. Since 2015, they've been the ones testing UFC fighters.
God, the pirate is one ugly dude, bro. That red beard is just nasty.
Catching cheaters and supposedly keeping the sport clean. But what if the system isn't about catching cheaters at all? What if it's about controlling who gets caught? There's a theory that's been circulating in MMA circles for years. A theory that makes fans, fighters, and even some coaches uncomfortable because of how much sense it makes. The theory is simple. If you cooperate with USADA, if you give them information about other fighters using performance-enhancing drugs, you get a pass.
They just let you slide. If you just rat on people, they let you slide. It's a good idea.
You can keep using steroids. You can keep cheating, as long as you're useful to them. Sounds crazy? Here's the thing. It's not entirely a conspiracy theory. It's actually written into USADA's rules. Article 10.6.1, substantial assistance. It's right there in the UFC's anti-doping policy. The clause explicitly.
So John Jones all those years was just ratting on everybody while juicing? Is that what I'm hearing right now?
Explicitly states that a fighter's suspension can be reduced or even completely eliminated if they provide useful information that leads to uncovering another athlete's doping violation or exposing someone who supplied or facilitated performance-enhancing drugs. Complete elimination of a suspension, zero punishment for providing information. So while that idea that you can take steroids if you snitch,
what UFC fighter, active UFC fighter, is the most likely to snitch? Right now, go off the top of your head. Corey Sandhagen. If Corey Sandhagen knows you're cheating, he is ratting the second he gets a chance.
sounds like something from a Reddit forum, It's based on real policy that USADA uses, a policy that creates a massive incentive for fighters to cooperate, rat out their competition, and potentially continue using themselves while staying under USADA's protection. Look at the pattern. Fighters get popped for PEDs, major names, guys who were championship contenders, and then, mysteriously, their suspensions get reduced, sometimes from years down to months, sometimes almost to nothing.
They just rat on everybody else. The cheaters know who else is cheating. They just rat on people. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Fixed UFC fights. Right now,
don't even get me started on Bulgarian.
UFC is actively investigating a massive
that dumb face, man. He burned me so bad that night. Isaac Bulgarian, you're a fraud.
What triggered the investigating a massive sports betting scandal involving UFC fights. What triggered the investigation was a fight between Isaac Bulgarian and Yair Deval. Bulgarian lost via rear naked choke, but here's the thing. He didn't even try to defend it. A professional MMA fighter.
No, hold on. He like pretend defended it for a minute and a half. He's like, I'll defend and then I'm just going to start throwing punches, which you obviously don't do. This guy
that apparently didn't know how to defend a choke. Something was wrong. Along with that fishiness, heavy money went on his opponent to win by first round finish. After that, reports broke that federal authorities were looking into suspicious betting patterns surrounding multiple UFC events. Unusual spikes in wagers.
Twitter 20 minutes before this fight was straight chaos. Everybody's tweeting, what do I do? The line's changing. It was chaos, start to finish. I'm on there. My dumbass, I was on Twitter saying, hey, just ride with Bulgarian. Don't be shaken. Ride into battle. Terrible decision.
On heavy underdogs. Massive money pouring in on specific outcomes minutes before the fights. Bets being placed by people connected to fighters, coaches, and cornermen.
Hey, UFC fighters, if you're going to cheat, at least let me know. I won't rat. I promise I won't.
Kind of patterns that only appear when someone knows something they shouldn't. Some estimates put out the number of compromised UFC fights at over 100. 100 fights. Think about that. And here's where it gets even.
If there's any ref that's rigging fights, Dan Murgliata. You heard it here first. MMA Tug stamped. Keep an eye on Dan.
Darker. Referees might be involved. Jason Herzog, one of the most experienced referees in the sport, according to some sources, is being investigated by the FBI as well. UFC 279 was staged. September 10th, 2022, UFC 279. Nate Diaz's final fight in the UFC. His farewell bout against rising star Khamzat Chimaev. What should have been a straightforward send-off turned into one of the most chaotic 24 hours in UFC history. Within minutes of weigh-ins, fans were convinced the whole thing was staged. Weigh-in day. Khamzat Chimaev steps on the scale, 178.5 pounds, for a welterweight fight with a 170-pound limit. He missed weight by 8.5 pounds.
Not surprising. That's typical Chimaev. Way too big for that division. If he cuts that weight, he ends up in a hospital bed. We've seen it.
Not a pound, not 2 pounds, 8.5 pounds. That's not missing weight. That's showing up for a completely different fight. The UFC went into crisis mode. Press conferences canceled, media obligations scrapped, Dana White vanished for hours. And when he finally emerged, he dropped a bomb. The entire card had been reshuffled. New opponents, new matchups.
If he sits here and tries to tell me a Kevin Holland fight was rigged, I got news for you, man. That's just Kevin.
Everything changed overnight. Nate Diaz would fight Tony Ferguson in the main.
The way Kevin Holland fights, you would think every single one of his fights is rigged.
Event. Two legends passed their prime in a fight that actually made sense. Chimaev would fight Kevin Holland instead. Musical chairs with professional fighters less than 24 hours before the event. Here's why fans immediately smelled a setup. The original Diaz vs Chimaev matchup was hated. Hardcore fans.
Can you imagine what Chimaev was going to do to Nate Diaz? Really think about that now that we've seen Chimaev in big fights.
As the UFC feeding a beloved veteran to a young killer just to humiliate him on his way out. Diaz himself had made it clear he wasn't happy about the fight. He wanted out of his UFC contract, and this felt like punishment for wanting to leave. The pay-per-view wasn't selling well. Nobody wanted to watch Nate get destroyed. But Diaz vs Ferguson, that was a dream fight.
That was kind of a dream matchup for him.
Two fan favorites. Two action fighters from the same era with history and mutual respect. It was the fight people actually wanted to see. So what if they planned it? What if Chimaev was told to miss weight, knowing it would force the card to be reshuffled into some...
This one's a stretch, Victor. I'm going to be honest. This one's a stretch, in my opinion.
fans would actually buy. Showtime kick was scripted. Anthony Pettis versus Benson Henderson for the lightweight championship. Final round. And then it happened. Pettis ran up the cage wall and kicked Henderson in the face. The Showtime kick. One of the most iconic moments in combat sports history. A move so spectacular, so perfectly executed, so impossibly cinematic that it defined an entire era. It's on every highlight reel, poster, every discussion about the greatest moments in MMA.
That is, if anything was going to be WWE, UFC, it's that kick right there.
But watch the fight closely. Right before Pettis launches himself off the cage, Benson Henderson does something strange. He taps his foot against the fence. Not accidentally, deliberately.
Ooh.
One clear tap with his right foot against the bottom of the cage. And seconds later, Pettis runs up that exact spot and throws the kick that made him famous. The conspiracy theory is simple. It was planned. The foot tap was the signal. And the most legendary knockout in MMA history was actually choreographed. Jose Aldo lied about
That would be insane if they're setting yourself up to get flatlined. It was probably just coincidence, but it's a fun conspiracy theory. Jose Aldo. This dude's 58 years old. I've heard this one before.
about his age. Jose Aldo, the King of Rio, the greatest featherweight in MMA history, 9 title defenses, nearly a decade of dominance, retired in 2025 at age 38, or did he? According to his birth certificate,
There's no chance he was 38. None.
Aldo was born September 9th, 1986. But here's the problem. In 1980s Brazil, especially in the favelas where Aldo grew up, birth registrations were a disaster. In the 1990s, 40% of births in Brazil went unregistered. In the 1980s, it was worse. In impoverished areas like the favelas, almost nobody registered births immediately.
The fact that any human being can go from that situation to a UFC champ like Jose Aldo, that's insane. I mean, what am I doing with my life? This dude went from that to UFC champ. God.
Months,
Shout out to Jose Aldo, though.
sometimes years.
Like the video while you're here, please. Thank you.
Sometimes never did it at all. So when Aldo finally in impoverished areas like the favelas, almost nobody registered births immediately. Parents waited months, sometimes years, sometimes never did it at all. So when Aldo finally got to the US, he had to tell the government office how old he was. And it's more than likely he told a small lie. If you're getting documents because you wanted to be a professional fighter, why wouldn't you shave a few years off? Think about it. You're a talented fighter trying to break into the big league. Youth is valued. Promoters want young prospects, not age.
But here's the thing, wouldn't he eventually just tell the truth about this? Like if it was that situation and he just like told a little lie to seem younger, if 20 years later he can't just tell the truth?
Aging veteran. Being 23 looks way better than being 26 or 27. And here's the rumor that won't die. One of Aldo's closest friends allegedly said behind closed doors that Aldo is over 40 years old. Not 36, over 40. The source is weak, trust me bro level. But the rumor has circulated for years in MMA circles. People who claim to know Aldo personally say he's older than his records show.
Banger video. Shout out to Victor MMA. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know in the comments if there's another video I should react to.